Welcome back to Fresh Outlook. The movie is called Selma. It tells the story of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his march from the deep South to Washington, D.C., waging what would become a successful fight for voting rights for black people. But the film paints U.S. President Lyndon Johnson as a foot-dragger on civil rights, and some of his aides who are still living. And historians, too, say this is not completely true.
He's got supporters. Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, inciting large-scale arrests and sympathy marches.
I'm very aware of that, Mr. Hoover. What I do know is he's nonviolent. What I need to know right now, what's Martin Luther King about to do next?
Mr. President, Dr.
We are back live here at Fresh Outlook. I am joined by the Ebru think tank, Reverend Forrest Pritchett of the MLK Leadership Program, Amanda Saunders, who is with the MLK Scholarship Association. She is the president of that group, and Dr. Uhura Williams of Fairfield University. Dr. Pritchett, let me begin with you. When I was writing that script before, referring to black people, I wasn't sure if I should use black people or African American, and I think what this tends to show us is the problems that we still have in discussing and describing race in America.
Yes, sir.
I mean, when CNN last week was doing a report on the Charlie Hebdo terroristic act, they described the black French national as an African American.
Yes.
Which was brought up by a lot of people as an folly. These are some of the little semantic things that we deal with.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts as I bring up this to you?
Well, among other things, to me, it reminds me of a period in time in which we, as the Negro population, fundamentally, were being defined by others anyway. We had no control over even how we were basically being defined. We go from being Negro, colored, Afro-American, African-Americans, and then the Black Power movement, black. We're looking for just what the Constitution guarantees everybody: freedom of speech, freedom of existence, so that we can indeed use all of our God-given talents to be all that God would have us to be in the context of the greatest democracy on the face of the earth. We want to help this country to achieve that in the 21st century.
We are joined by another guest who will be joining us via Skype from the West Coast. He is Fraser Heston, and his father is Charlton Heston, who was one of the marchers in the march from the Deep South, Selma, Alabama, to Washington, D.C. And Fraser, I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan. I was actually doing impressions of your father before. Get your filthy paws off me, you damn dirty ape. Loved your father, interviewed him when he was a leader for the NRA. Tell me a little bit about his work as a civil rights activist and what he would be thinking about America in the year 2015.
Thanks, Logan. Thanks very much for having me. I'm honored to be on your show. I think my father was a little bit ahead of his time in terms of the industry reaction to the civil rights movement, which I think was painfully slow. By the industry, of course, I mean Hollywood. He led the arts contingent in the March on Washington with Dr. King. He was pleased and honored to be chosen to do so, along with some other wonderful actors like Harry Belafonte and Burt Lancaster. It was a terribly important part of his life, something he was very proud of. He went on to champion civil rights and equal opportunity employment in his work at the Screen Actors Guild as well, and throughout his career. So I think his participation in the civil rights movement is something that we can all be proud of.
Fraser, tell me a little bit about this latest movie, Selma. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's controversial in that it depicts Lyndon Johnson as a foot-dragger or an obstacle to the civil rights movement. I don't know if you've seen the movie. I was wondering what your thoughts are as a filmmaker, somebody who might take some poetic liberties in scripting a movie to build up the image of Martin Luther King.
I did see the movie, and I thought it was wonderful. I liked it better than I thought I would. In fact, I knew there was some controversy about it in terms of its historical accuracy, but I think the gist of it, the heart of it, was spot on. And I thought the emotion of it as a filmmaker, as a film fan, which I am first and foremost, was very successful. I thought the acting was superb. David Oyelowo was marvelous, and I thought it was a shame that Ava DuVernay did not receive a nomination.
Right. Thank you, Fraser. Uhura, let me talk to you a little bit about this movie. Do you think there are forces out there trying to derail the message of the movie by pointing to this, what might be perceived as a small historical inaccuracy?
Well, I think for those people who are concerned, I don't think they think it's a small inaccuracy. And I think the problem is, and this happens typically with Hollywood, this isn't a documentary. It's certainly not a 400-page tome, something like The Great Taylor Branch has written on the Reverend Dr. King, a 3-part trilogy of his life. It's a movie, and the filmmaker has the difficult task in 2 hours to try to tell the story of an entire campaign that was central to this movement. That's a difficult job. They have to manufacture heroes, manufacture dialogues, and manufacture villains. And I think Lyndon Johnson suffers in this particular film by lumping him with J. Edgar Hoover and making him, in some sense, the nemesis to civil rights, when in fact, if we look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, here was one of the great champions of that, far more forward-looking, far more proactive than Kennedy had ever been. But of course, with the bully pulpit of a dead president in order to push through the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Voting rights was different. Selma was different. The film, in some sense, is unfair to Johnson. And in that sense, his critics are right to point to it and say, this is historically inaccurate. And our fear is that people won't read the books. They won't dig deeper. And what they'll come away with is a skewed view of this historical moment, not just of Lyndon Johnson, but the members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee who don't come off looking well in some regards, and in a total absence of young people who are not privileged in this story as much as they could be.
Dr. Pritchett, you were a college student during the Selma March. Tell me about your impressions of that march back then and your impressions of this movie now.
Well, in a personal sense, the first attitude we had to deal with was the fear of death under all circumstances. I had to say that.
What state were you going to school in at the time?
Delaware.
Delaware.
I was at Delaware State University. And, but I say that because so often, once again, when you see the pictures, you see lots of people. But prior to that, when we have rallies, so many people would come to the rally but never show up for a march because of that fear. So I have to always give credit where credit is due. These were fearful situations, drastic. So we had to step forward, really embracing our inner spiritual cores. So I cannot overlook that at all.
Amanda, do you see anything on the college campus that in any way mimics the type of heroic actions that we saw in this film, where people are willing to take a stand, take a march, put their principles before their own personal safety?
Yes. We recently, a lot of the students that I'm friends with at school, we took a trip to New York City to participate in the Millions March. We also had New Jersey shutdowns, where there was rallies and marches in intersections of various places in New Jersey where the students were just shutting down the intersections to protest. So we have participated in a lot of different movements ourselves, and even when the Trayvon Martin case was happening, we did host a march at our school during class to demonstrate our feelings on that as well. And when the movie did come out, I saw it as a great opportunity for the MLKSA organization to go see it, to uplift us and empower us and to remind us of why we're here, what we're doing as a student organization, and to also include the student body, the community of Seton Hall, the community of South Orange, to spread awareness of what we're trying to do as well. So.
Sounds great. Amanda, thank you for joining us today. Uhura, you're going to be back. Dr. Pritchett, thank you for joining us today and giving us your insight on these very important topics. When we come back, we're going to take a look at Hollywood as it honors its own and a group of people it snubbed. After this.